Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Excellencies, honorable guests, distinguished delegates, college ladies and gentlemen, good morning. The Honorable Rector and Vice Rector Universitas Negeri Padang, Dean and Vice Dean in Universitas Negeri Padang, and all the participants, the 5th Padang International Conference on Economics, Education, Business and Accounting, PICEEBA 2020. It is a great honor and pleasure for me. My name is Hari Setia Putra, and on behalf of the committee, we would like to welcome to all of you for the annual session of the 5th Padang International Conference on Economics, Education, Business and Accounting, PICEEBA 2020. Our invited keynote speakers, Associate Professor Kanako and Kusanagi PhD from Tokyo University, Japan. Associate Professor Dr. Deborah Malik from Deakin University, Australia. Associate Professor Dr. Efrizal Sofian from Universitas Negeri Padang, Indonesia. For the following agenda, it will be the Holy Quran recitation by Ms. Yunia Safitri.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
A'udzu billahi minasy syaithanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ya ayyuhalladzina amanu idza qila lakum tafassahu fil majalis Idza qila lakum tafassahu fil majalisi fafsahu yafsahillahu lakum. Wa idza qila shuzu fanshuzu yarfa'illahu alladhina amanu minkum. وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ وَاللَّهُ بِمَا Wallahu bima ta'maluna khabir. Sadaqallahu
Allahul
azim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Without further ado, we would like to invite Assistant Professor Herlina Helmi as the conference chair to read the official report of the 5th PICEEBA 2020.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Rector and Vice Rectors, Universitas Negeri Padang, the Honorable Dean, Vice Deans, Economic Faculty, and all of the Deans at Universitas Negeri Padang, and the distinguished our invited speakers, the Excellencies, author and participants. And I would like to extend my warmest welcome to the 5th Padang International Conference on Education, Economic, Business, Management, and Accounting, PICEEBA. First, all praise due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has bestowed our pleasures for the health, the opportunities, and the happiness we feel today. Without His mercy, it is impossible for all of us to join here. Secondly, salawat and greetings remains poured to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who has been guiding us on the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Today, I also would like to express my deep gratitude to all the committees who have worked hard, sacrificed their time for their family, and taking the risk going out from their comfort zone during this pandemic. So I really thank you. It is an honor for me to be here on this occasion because this event is the first virtual international conference held by the Faculty Economic, Universitas Negeri Padang in particular, and Universitas Negeri Padang generally. PICEEBA has been held 4 times, but the 5th PICEEBA is the first conference held virtual. At this conference, we have 114 papers were registered with 1,833 or almost 20 participants from all various regions. However, we are not free from various mistakes, but both in the preparation and implementation of this conference, which resulted in discomfort for all. So as the chairman of the committee, I apologize for the inconvenience. And the last, I'm looking forward to see you again in other occasion in the near future. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Among this time, we would like to invite Rector of Universitas Negeri Padang to convey an acknowledgement and officially open for the 5th PICEEBA 2020.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Salatu wassalamu ala asrofil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi rasulil ajmain. Allahumma shalli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama shallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim amma ba'du. The Honorable Deputy Rectors for Students Affairs and Deputy Rectors for Corporations of the Universitas Negeri Padang, Dean of the Faculties of Economics, Associate Professor Dr. Idris, deans of other faculties, deputy deans, invited speakers, distinguished guests, and participants of the 5th Padang International Conference on Education, Economics, Business, and Accounting. We are now together witnessing the opening one of the 2020 International Conference Series in Universitas Negeri Padang, which has received generous support from many partners. This international conference is for the first time held virtually. Holding the virtual international conference provides us new challenges, especially in managing participants, presentation schedules, and the use of technology. And the theme of this conference is embracing change and transformations of education, economics, business, management, and accounting in the disruptive era. Change is a feature of our lives. The world around us is changing all the time. Our natural environment we dwell in and the business climate we were in. New innovations are disrupting our lives at a much faster pace than we know. And we have to learn how to adapt and embrace these changes. It is often said that the one and only constant in life is change. This is certainly the case in business, where every change in the external market or new initiative or ideas bring some type of change to the organization. The reality is most people don't like change because it can be stressful, especially when change happens unexpectedly. Change can be scary. It represents the unknown, taking us out of comfort zones. Anytime an organization embarks on a new initiative, there is a risk of failure, which could have significant financial consequences. Yet, if we don't change, failure is certain. As society evolves, we must too. Organizations not only understand the importance of change, but embrace change, the ones that will ultimately be most successful. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the escalating COVID-19 pandemic at present affects not only the ways of life for people around the world, but also the whole economic system. This is considered just the beginning of the nightmare, as global economies are expected to face another several months of economic recession and several years of recovery. Business organizations must expeditiously launch rigorous measures to handle the situation. Among the early measures taken by the organizations are reducing costs and keeping expenses down, with more focus shifting to investment in technologies to optimize work processes, to gain competitive advantages and become a market leader. COVID-19 and post-COVID-19 situation will be key factors for unprecedented disruptive changes toward education, economies, societies, and personal behaviors. Many words still are going to be changed. Dedication or high work capability alone is not enough anymore. Technology skills are becoming critical in bringing businesses to ride out of the changes. The COVID-19 outbreak is considered the most prominent catalyst in years for both people and organizations to step up and adjust themselves toward changes. If the organization still do not begin transformation and development of human skills to stay current with the trend of today, it may be too late for them and their business performance in the future. Distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the academic staff, administrative staff, and students of Universitas Negeri Padang, we'd like to thank our invited speakers, Associate Professor Deborah Malik from Deakin University, Australia, Associate Professor Kanako Kusanagi from Tokyo University, Japan, and Associate Professor Erizal Sofian from Universitas Negeri Padang, Indonesia. We also thank all parallel session speakers and, of course, participants for your contribution, which will make this conference a success. Who could have imagined a better exchange than seeing plenary speakers from several countries and representatives from many institutions here joining forces in the conference to share research findings, inspiring ideas, and the important things is having the opportunities to renew old friendship, make new acquaintances, and virtual photo sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, we expect we will learn new ideas from each other, which we can adopt and adapt to further improve our work in this important area. I know that there will be many interesting and useful presentations, both in plenary session and in parallel sessions. I believe many good experiences will be shared and good lessons will be learned. Members of organizing committee have been working very hard. I would like to thank them for their dedication, time, and effort. I wish also to thank our patrons, individual and organization partners and volunteers. Without their generosity, we would not be able to create a total environment to support your full participation. Thank you all for your presence and participation. And you are the very important part of the conference success. Please enjoy the conference. Ladies and gentlemen, by saying Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, 5th Padang International Conference on Education, Economics, Business, and Accounting is officially open. Thank you. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
For closing the opening ceremony with the blessings, we would like to invite Assistant Professor Gesit Tabrani to lead the dua recitation for Muslim.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, let us bow our head for a moment. We pray to God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that the conference will be blessed. I will lead this prayer based on the teaching of Islam, and those who are not Muslims, you are pleased to pray according to each your beliefs. We start with istighfar. Astaghfirullahal azim, alladzi la ilaha illa huwal hayyul qayyum wa atubu ilaih. Astaghfirullahal azim, alladzi la ilaha illa huwal hayyul qayyum wa atubu ilaih. Astaghfirullahal azim, alladzi la ilaha illa huwal hayyul qayyum wa atubu ilaih. Na'udzu billahi minasy syaithanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Hamdan syakirin, hamdan na'imin, hamdan yuafi ni'amahu wa yukafi mazida. Ya Rabbana lakal hamdu, kama yanbaghi li jalali wajhika wa azimi sultanik. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad. Allahumma Rabbana zalamna anfusana wa illam taghfir lana wa tarhamna lanakunanna minal khasirin. Allahumma ighfir lana wa liwalidayna wa li jami'il muslimina wal muslimat wal mu'minina wal mu'minat al ahya'i minhum wal amwat innaka sami'un qaribun mujibud da'wat wa yaqadiyal hajat. Oh Allah, today we gather here to bring about the 5th Padang International Conference on Education, Economics, Business, and Accounting with the theme, Embracing Change and Transformation of Education, Economics, Business, Management, and Accounting in the Disruptive Era. Allah, make this international conference as a useful science assembly, as medium of sharing useful ideas, knowledge, and experiences of scholars, researchers, and students of various disciplines. May the conference we organize today benefit to our life, broaden our knowledge, shine our ideas, and lead us to be successful, productive persons, which in turn will be boost dignity of our nation. Allahumma arinal haqqa haqqa warzuqna ittiba'ah wa arinal batila batilan warzuqna ijtinabah. Oh Allah, show us the truth as true and inspire us to follow it, and show us falsehood as falsehood and inspire us to abstain from it. Allahumma ya Allah, help me remember you, to be grateful to you, and to worship you in excellent manner. Allahumma a'inni ala dhikrika wa syukrika wa husni ibadatik. Allahumma ya Allah, you are the one who can fulfill our dua. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adzaban nar. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun alal mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to invite our moderator for plenary session, Assistant Professor Dina Patricia, PhD. Time is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Praise to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, who has been giving us blessings, mercy, so we can be here together in a healthy condition. Salawat and salam to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who has guided us to the right way. Honorable Rector of Universitas Negeri Padang, Honorable Dean of Faculty of Economics, Honorable Deans of Universitas Negeri Padang, Honorable all invited speakers, and all participants. Welcome to the plenary session of PICEEBA. Ladies and gentlemen, this plenary session will be divided into two sections. The first, the presentation from all invited speakers. We have 3 invited speakers, including Associate Professor Dr. Deborah Malik, Assistant Professor Kanako and Kusanagi, PhD, and Associate Professor Dr. Efrizal Sofyan. A speaker has 25 minutes to present his paper. Second part is question and answer. So if you have any question, please write the question in Zoom chat room or YouTube live chat. I would like to introduce the first speaker, Professor Deborah Malik. Professor Malik got his PhD in economics from Emory University, USA. His professional position now as an associate professor, Department of Economics, Deakin University, Australia. He is also director of research in this department. Professor Deborah Malik also got so many honors and awards, including Excellence in Research, School of EIF, Deakin University 2011. and etc. His research interests are macroeconomics, development economics, applied econometrics, particularly in economics, growth and productivity, business cycle, monetary policy in developing countries, and microfinance. He is also interested in spectral analysis of time series. Professor Abdullah Malik also has many publications, including in book chapter and reputable journals, such as European Economic Review, American Economic Journal Macroeconomics, Journal of Policy Modeling, and Journal of Macroeconomics. That's a brief introduction to our first invited speaker. So now we will listen his presentation. Professor Abdullah Malik, time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks for a very long introduction about me. I don't probably deserve that, but I'm okay. Before going to share my screen, I'll stop the video so that it doesn't distract anything. So when I finish my presentation, then I'll then on my video again, so nothing will be stopped or nothing will be disrupted. Okay, so let me minimize others' video. Yes. So this paper is, the title is International Capital Allocations, the Lucas Paradox and Other Puzzles. And this is with Robert Chirinko at University of Illinois at Chicago in US. So this paper is about estimating return on capital at the cross-country level. So before moving on, let me give you a brief outline of my presentation. So I'll first start with the motivation, why return on capital is important. And when we calculate return on capital, we have some new and revised data, which is some kind of totally different and revised data from the previous studies. And before going to the main body of the paper talking, I'll briefly give summary of the results so that you can get an idea what I'm going to talk about, or even at the end, if I cannot finish in time, so that you can get a sense about the main context of the paper. I'll also talk about some new adjustment that we make in the calculation of the return on capital, and we develop a new framework to calculate at the cross-country level that is based on the steady state value. I'll talk about, based on our new adjustment and new framework, the global misallocation of capital. And if the world capital is reallocated, how much benefit that the world can get. And then I'll raise some remaining issues or remaining puzzles that still we couldn't answer yet. And these are new puzzles in this area of research, and we're still working on that. So let's move on. So the return on an investment in private capital is central to many ongoing academic and policy discussions. So these are some examples. So Casselli and Ferrer in 2007 in QJE paper, then Garinsas and Jean, they argued that the extent to which capital is misallocated globally, and therefore the scope for foreign aid and other policies to improve welfare, depends crucially on the return to capital. Thomas Piketty's influential work that everyone knows, I'm sure, that a secular increase in wealth inequality is based on the notion that return to capital exceeds the growth rate of the economy as a whole. Recently, the secular stagnation hypothesis, advanced by Larry Summers, it links a persistent decline in investment demand to a persistent decline in the return on capital. The welfare implications of fiscal policy are highly dependent on the return to capital. For example, Oliver Blanchard, in his analysis of government debt, emphasizes the link between the cost of public debt and the profitability of alternative uses of resources. In this case, it is capital formation. So he finds that since this return is low, the cost of public debt is also low. And finally, the famous Lucas paradox, why capital doesn't flow from rich to poor countries. And I'm sure that everyone knows this paradox. The large and sustained differences in the marginal product of capital contradict the neoclassical framework that capital will flow to the destination where marginal product of capital is the highest, that we do not observe. So we have some new and revised data here. Once again, we are interested in the return on private capital. So very recently, International Monetary Fund, they have made available private and public capital stock data that was not previously available at the cross-country level. We use that. Very recently, World Bank has made available the data on rent share in GDP, and we need this information to correct for the share of natural resources in the total capital stock. We'll see in few minutes that we also correct for the size of the shadow economy, and we get this data from Snyder and his co-authors. For all other data, we use the Penwald table 9. In this sample, our sample consists of 88 countries, and our sample period is 1970 to 2014, and we particularly choose this period because we have observations without any missing values for this period. And we define rich poor based on the World Bank classification. Okay, so before moving, so this is main results. So based on our new data, that is private and government capital stock, and a new framework that we use to calculate the steady state value of return on capital, we find that return on capital in poor countries and the rich poor gap is increasing since 1990-1991. And the world capital misallocation is very large. In fact, it is 14 to 21% of global capital stock. And this is largely due to the difference among the country-specific steady states. And we'll see later how to calculate the steady state. But the benefit from capital reallocation is very small. It's about 1 to 1.5% of global GDP. And all our estimates, this misallocation cost and reallocation benefit, it depends on the crucial parameter, which is the elasticity of substitution between capital and labor. Okay. So before moving, let me tell you that I'm going to skip all technical details, all technical maths. I'll focus on very simple equations. Okay, so this is a brief literature review. So there's a huge literature, in fact, in this context. So I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to focus on only 3 most influential studies in this area. That is, the first one is by Robert Lucas in 1990. And his paper is the origin of the Lucas paradox that I mentioned before, that given that the marginal product of capital is very high in the developing countries, why we don't see that capital is flowing to the developing countries from the rich countries. Then Casselli and Ferrer in 2007 in Quarterly Journal of Economics, they refined the estimate of Lucas. They made some very important adjustments. One is the share of natural capital, and second is the relative price of capital. That means price of capital relative to the price of output. After making these 2 adjustments, they found that Lucas paradox does not exist. It means that marginal product of capital in poor countries is not higher. In fact, it is slightly lower at about 20%. Then the last paper is by Monge, Naranjo and his co-authors. I'll call it MSS, which is published in American Economic Journal Macroeconomics in 2019, just last year. They relaxed some of the strict assumption made by Casselli and Ferrer and used some revised data, and they found that there is still Lucas paradox, but that is declining over time. So now let me move to our framework. I'm not going in detail. I'm going to give you the simplest way to explain how to explain. So I have the production function here. It's a very general production function. Output is produced by labor. KP, that is private capital. KG is the government capital. KN is the natural capital. Yeah. And for simplicity, I omit the time and country subscript. And under linear homogeneous assumption, if we take first order derivative, and then we end up with this very simple equation where output is the sum of marginal product of each input multiplied by that input. So for example, FL is the marginal product of labor multiplied by labor. This is the marginal product of private capital multiplied by private capital, and other two follows similarly, marginal product of government and natural capital. Our focus is on this term, FKP, marginal product of private capital. We exclusively focus on this term and we try to estimate. And simply this is the definition of capital income share, which is 1 minus labor income share. Labor income share is the fraction of output that goes to the labor force. Okay, so we can rearrange this equation, Euler equation, very simply. After some manipulation, we end up with this capital income share, which is the sum of income share of three capital, that is private, government, and natural capital. We will be playing with this simple equation, and we'll show that this equation can in fact replicate all estimations. It can replicate Lucas, it can replicate Casselli and Ferrer that we have seen before, it can replicate MSS. Okay, we'll do that. Before moving, let me tell you one thing. This term is marginal product of capital. This is in fact the physical output. That means the change in output for 1 unit change in private capital. When we talk about return on capital, in fact, that physical capital, that physical output, that is marginal product of capital, is adjusted by the relative price of capital. That means price of capital relative to the output, that is the return on capital. Sometimes we call it user cost of capital in investment literature. Okay. So let me look at what Lucas did. Lucas made an assumption. In fact, during his time, natural capital data was not available. So what is implicit in Lucas' estimation that natural capital does not exist and the marginal product of private and government capital is the same. Now, if we impose the same restriction that Lucas implicitly defined and use our data to calculate marginal product of capital, we find that marginal product of capital is 40% larger in our full sample period, which is 1970 to 2014. And I take two sub-sample period because of, as I mentioned before, there's a structural break in fact in 1990 in our findings. So that's why I take two sub-periods. In fact, marginal product of capital in poor countries is larger, much larger in both sub-periods and also for the entire period. So Lucas paradox exists. So our finding is also very consistent with what Lucas found. So let me show you this evolution of marginal product of capital at each point in time, ranging from 1970 to 2010. So we see that the poor countries' marginal product of capital is large and persistently higher than rich countries. What Casselli and Ferrer did. When they're writing the paper, natural capital data are available. They use that. But their assumption was that marginal product of all three types of capital are the same. That means marginal product of private, government, and natural capital are the same. Their another innovation was to allow for the difference in the relative price of capital. That is price of capital relative to output that Lucas didn't do. And then we call it return on capital. What Casselli, as I mentioned before, they found that the Lucas paradox does not exist. So when we use or impose the same restrictions that Casselli and Ferrer used and use our data, we find that marginal product of, return on capital is in fact lower in poor countries. Just the opposite what we have seen before. That means we have an inverse Lucas paradox. Now see here. The bottom line is for the poor country now. Now go to MSS. They relaxed one of the assumption that Casselli and Ferrer made. So they assume that marginal product of natural capital is not the same. Here you see that this term, but they still maintain the assumption that marginal product of private and government capital are the same. When we use their restrictions and calculate return on capital, we find that marginal product of capital are almost equal for poor and rich countries. So Lucas paradox is rejected. So see here the pattern. For the second period, in fact, marginal product, return on capital is larger for poor countries, but there is no clear pattern. Now go to our own adjustment. So we have three adjustments. One is shadow economy adjustment. And remember that we are interested in the marginal product of private capital. So we need to relax that assumption that marginal product of private and government capital are the same. So we need to make this government capital adjustment. And third thing is capital weighting. So countries vary in their size. So you cannot add apples and oranges. So when you aggregate the marginal product of capital or return on capital by poor and rich, we use each country's capital weight. Okay, now this shadow economy, in fact, these are outside the market sometimes. It is so this is not counted in GDP. So okay, let me read the definition exactly given by Snyder. The shadow economy includes all market-based legal production of goods and services that are deliberately concealed from public authorities for any of the following reasons: to avoid payment of income, value-added or other taxes, to avoid payment of social security contributions, to avoid having to meet certain legal labor market standards such as minimum wages, maximum working hours, safety standards, etc., and to avoid complying with certain administrative procedures such as completing statistical questionnaires or other administrative forms. We find that the share of shadow economy or shadow economy as a percentage of GDP is very large. It's still, even for the rich countries, it is about 19%. For poor countries, it is almost double at around 38%. So we make this adjustment, but still we make the assumption that businesses are not hidden, just their value added. That means when you are producing something, your capital stock and your business, you cannot hide because it's the legal activity. But what you can hide is that your value added to avoid tax and some other things. So here we relax the, okay, this is our shadow economy adjustment, first one. Second one is our government capital adjustment. We relax the assumption that marginal product of private and government capital are not the same, but still we need to make another assumption is that they're proportional, and we get this number. So this is phi is the marginal product of government capital to marginal product of private capital. It is 1.2 for poor country and 1.9 for rich countries, and we get this value from a study of Lowy and his co-authors at the International Monetary Fund, who in fact constructed this data. Okay. So after making these two adjustments, here what we find is that marginal product of capital is much larger in poor countries compared to the rich countries. Not only that, the gap between rich and poor countries are increasing since 1990. So this kind of break, we see something happening since 1990. In fact, and we'll spend much time on explaining why the gap is increasing. And still we couldn't find a answer. We are still working on that. And that is our next paper. So this is the summary of the graph that I have shown before. Before moving, let me tell you one thing. Instead of making both adjustments, that is the shadow economy and government capital adjustment, if we make each of these adjustments separately, the results are still qualitatively similar, but the gap between rich and poor is slightly lower. Now to check the robustness here, what would happen if we didn't make these two adjustments? Someone might say that, okay, your results are solely based on your adjustment. Okay, now suppose we do not make this adjustment, but still we calculate return on capital for rich and poor countries using capital weight. We still find that this similar pattern since 1990s, that return on capital is much larger for poor countries and the gap is increasing since 1990. So this finding that gap is increasing since 1990 is not based on these two adjustments. Something else is happening there. So these are the findings. Okay. Now, okay, let me summarize before moving. So we find that Lucas paradox persists, and return on capital for both poor and rich, and also the poor-rich return on capital ratio has been increasing since 1990. So there is a break here. So we have a new framework now. Why do we need a new framework? So when we evaluate capital allocations, we are interested in the steady state value of return on capital. So far, what we have seen, it is the evolution over time. So that does not say anything about the steady state value. Why? Even if the steady state for poor and rich countries are equal, dynamics of capital accumulation process from the initial conditions to the steady state distorts the mapping between the spot ROK. By spot ROK, I mean that the times series of ROK at each point in time into the steady state value of ROK. Okay, I'll show you two graphs here. So to get the steady state value, we need a mapping from the spot value, and we need the transition dynamics. And now we are going to do that. But before that, let me show you two graphs simply. Here, these two are hypothetical graph, in fact. So both poor and rich have the same initial condition here, and their ultimate steady state far away to the right, suppose, are the same. Now, if you take the time average of poor and rich as a measure of steady state capital allocation, it will be distorted, biased. Steady state value lies somewhere in the here somewhere, probably we don't know. And we need to know this. What we see from this diagram, we see the transitional dynamics. And from there, we have to make inference about the steady state. So take another example here. Both poor and rich countries, they start with different initial conditions here, the gap here, but their steady state value is same. Suppose here. Now, if we take the time average or average of the spot value of return on capital, it will be somewhere here, and it will show that return on capital in poor country is larger than rich countries, which is not true. So we need steady state value. Okay. So we need an equation, in fact, to estimate the steady state value of return on capital, and we derived it explicitly from an optimization problem. And we rely on a partial adjustment model, and which is developed in many places in the literature. In fact, it was first developed by Isner and Storrs in 1959, and then Robert Lucas in 1967. But our formulation closely follows the derivation in Keenan 1979 Econometrica and Thomas Sargent's textbook. We follow that. I'm not showing any maths, any optimization problem, anything here. I'll just move to the equation that we derive after all this optimization problems. So here, let me tell you how do we get that. So policymakers minimize cost. There are two types of cost. One is misallocation cost and another is adjustment cost. So misallocation cost occur because the current return on capital deviates from the steady state return on capital. Adjustment cost represent lost output from disruption to the existing production process as return on capital is changed and capital is allocated. So these installation costs are a standard element in modeling input demands, in fact. So now I skip all the details and all the maths. We end up with this equation where left hand side is the change in return on capital and right hand side is the lagged value of return on capital. This lambda is a composite parameter, but we don't need at this moment what is inside lambda, but this is the speed of adjustment, and we vary it by rich and poor countries, G for country group. Okay. After imposing the steady state value, long run value, we can get return on capital for country I is the alpha I divided by lambda G. So now calculate steady state value of return on capital. So I'm going to, okay, for limitation of time. So if someone the chair, if reminds me, you can speak anytime to remind me how many minutes I have. I'll be happy. I can't see anything other than my screen now. So here, this graph shows the relation between steady state value and the average. So average value of the spot return on capital. So the first two rows is the steady state values here, and the bottom two rows, red values, these are the average of the steady average of the time series or spot values that the graph we have shown before. Based on that, we see that in the earlier period in 1970 to 1990, there's very little difference between steady state value and the average of the spot values. So for poor countries, it is 0.18 versus 0.19. For rich countries, it is 0.12 versus 0.116. So this result suggests some combination of adjustment speeds that are sufficiently quick and return on capital shocks that are sufficiently small, so that during this period, 1970 to 1990, economies do not stray too far away from their steady states. However, the second sub-period, that is 1991 to 2000 period, and as I mentioned, there's a structural break in the time series as well. The steady state value of return on capital are much larger than the average value. So for example, for poor countries, it is 0.3 versus 0.26. For rich countries, it is 0.17 versus 0.15. So the steady state value is larger than the average value. What does it mean? This suggests an over accumulation of capital. And as both poor and rich countries move to their steady states, their return on capital need to raise through reduction in the capital output ratio. So thus, the question is not why doesn't capital flow from rich to poor countries. Now, rather, you can ask a different question. Why has capital flowed so freely to poor and rich countries in recent years? In fact, and we also see the adjustment speed here, the lambda parameter, it varies by poor and rich. And in the second period, adjustment is slower than the first period. So, okay, before moving, let me summarize once again. Even after calculating the steady state value, we find that the Lucas paradox persists. Adjustment speeds vary among poor and rich countries, and it slows down in the latter period, that is since 1990. And gap between spot return on capital average of their average and the steady state value has increased in latter period. And this is the crucial or most puzzling finding, the last one. And these results are robust in variety of ways, estimation, procedure, everything. I'm skipping all this econometrics. What are the likely explanations for that? In fact, so there are two possible explanations of our main result, that steady state value is larger than their average of spot value. One is by Ben Bernanke, that's called savings glut hypothesis, and another is by Larry Summers, which is secular stagnation hypothesis. So savings glut hypothesis says that there is an excess amount of savings and subsequent capital accumulation lowers the spot value of return on capital relative to the steady state values. Secular stagnation hypothesis, that is advanced by Summers, is that private investment is persistently lower than private savings. So we test the implication of these two hypotheses by comparing outflow from the capital sector in terms of capital income and inflows into the capital sector in terms of gross capital formation. I'll show in two graphs is that, okay, implication of the savings glut hypothesis that capital formation has been rising is rejected as inflows trend downward in the latter period. In the next graph, you see here the inflows is trending downward for rich countries. So this hypothesis is rejected. By contrast, the secular stagnation hypothesis predicts a lower rate of capital formation. Okay. However, this theory is inconsistent with the rising return on capital as an increase in outflows. If you look especially for the poor countries, we see their capital formation is not declining, it is increasing, but at the same time, return on capital is increasing. So we do not find support, none of these two hypotheses. So we are still working on that puzzle, solving this puzzle, and that will be our next paper. So, okay, now let's move on. Some policy implications here. So we focus on misallocation of private capital that arises due to differences in countries' return on capital and the global return on capital. What is global return on capital? It is that return on capital to which all countries would converge if existing capital stock were allowed to maximize global output. So if all capital stocks are allowed to freely flow all over the world where the return is highest, then we would have a single return on capital for all countries, the same. So that the global return of capital, and using a CES production function and its first order condition for capital, we get this expression that I'm not going in detail. We use this expression to calculate the misallocation, and we evaluate its absolute value because we are interested in the distorting effects of global misallocation. And remember, this parameter sigma is the elasticity of substitution between capital and labor. That we'll see is very crucial. So I'm not going in all detailed results. I'm just giving the key findings in one line. For our preferred value of sigma, elasticity of substitution between capital and labor, which is 0.5 in fact, and I have done some work at the cross-country level, and this choice of the value of elasticity of substitution is consistent with the literature. We find that the difference between country-specific steady state, star is steady state, and the global steady state, that means the return on, what would have been the return on capital if capital were allowed to move freely, that indicate that 16.2% of the global capital is misallocated. Now, how sensitive is this number to the choice of sigma? When sigma increases to the Cobb-Douglas value of 1, we know that when the sigma becomes 1, then the CES production function becomes Cobb-Douglas production function. In that case, the misallocation doubles. If we choose a different value of the sigma 1.5, the misallocation cost triples, in fact. Okay. Now look at the reallocation. Okay. So now we quantify the additional output that would be gained if existing capital stock was allocated optimally across all the countries. Okay. And we derive this expression. I'm not going in detail. In that case, we see that for our preferred value of sigma equals 0.5, the gain is 1.2% of global GDP. Global GDP would increase 1.2%, and the poor countries would be benefited by 4.9%. That means GDP of all poor countries would increase by 4.9%, and the GDP of rich countries would decrease by 1.1% because capital will flow from rich to poor countries. Okay, and these values are increasing with the value of sigma, but still very large value of sigma of 1.5. The benefit is 3.7%, which is still modest. Now, if we do another counterfactual where we restrict that GDP of the rich countries do not suffer from any loss, in the sense that the decrease in GDP in rich countries is compensated by poor countries. In that case, still we have the global benefit is still the same. So the benefit of poor countries decreased from 4.9% to 3.2%. So what is conclusion? Lucas paradox exists. There's a large misallocation of global capital, and benefit from reallocation is small, and the choice of the value of the elasticity of substitution between capital and labor is crucial. The last slide. So new puzzles. Since 1990, return on capital for poor and rich countries have been rising sharply. Once again, the gap between poor and rich countries has been widening, and the steadiest state value of return on capital exceeded the spot value of return on capital. There is over accumulation of capital since 1990. These are the new puzzles that we are working on. And thank you, I'm done. So I'm going to minimize this, and I'm going to open my, I have to stop sharing my video, otherwise I can't see any of these things. So I stop share. Okay, then I start video.
Thank you very much, Professor Deborah Malik, for the enriching presentation. And before we move to next speakers, I would like to remind all participants, if you have any question, please write the question in Zoom chat room or YouTube live chat. Thank you. Now we move to the next invited speaker. I would like to introduce Professor Kanako Kusanagi. Professor Kanako Kusanagi got her PhD in education from of Education, University of London, United Kingdom. Now she is an assistant professor center for advanced school education and evidence-based research, graduated School of Education, the University of Tokyo. She got so many grants and fellowships, including Challenging Research Exploratory Grant by Japan Society of Promotion of Science, School as Learning Community as an Approaching for Educational Sustainable Development, a comparative study in Japan and Indonesia, 2018 to present. And she also has published her works in reputable journals such as Sustainability and Educational Studies. So that's the brief introduction to Professor Kanako. So Professor Kanako Kusanagi, time is yours.
Thank you very much, Ibu Dina, for a nice introduction. I'm quite impressed by your ability to make such a great PowerPoint to introduce me. And before I start, I am Kanako Kusanagi from the University of Tokyo. It's raining hard here today. I hope it's sunny in Padang. I hope I could be there instead of doing this online webinar, but it's still great to see you. I have been to University Negeri Padang last November when there was an international conference for lesson study. And I had a very nice rundan every day, Masakan Padang. And I'd like to thank you very much for lecture and also by lectures, Pak Livnardi and Pak Hendra, and also Pak Idris, Dean of Economics Faculty, for inviting me today and organizing this wonderful seminar, and also Pak Marwan, whom I met last November and invited me to be here today. Actually, I was supposed to be there physically in June, but now I am here. And wonderful organizing committee for preparing this. And of course, the participants, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a bit challenging. We cannot see each other face to face, but I will do my best. And I, of course, welcome any question or have inputs from you through chat. I read them, so please let me know. And so Pak Divnardi said in his opening speech, although it's very uncomfortable, but we have to change in this society. And this is relevant to what I'm going to speak today, transforming learning in the disruptive era. And I would like also say thank you to Deborah for his wonderful presentation. And although my expertise is not economics, the thing he said reminds me of our life today. He talked about shadow economy and how productivity is influenced by the factor which is not visible to us. And this is the situation we are facing right now. For example, as academics, we are forced to be productive and doing research, doing education, but we often don't see the shadow work behind. For example, when we are working from home, we have other responsibility, especially for mothers, to take care of our children. So we cannot be productive as much as those who don't have to have that kind of responsibility. So we have to always consider this kind of factor when we are teaching as a lecturer. Maybe your students have other responsibility as well, and we have to not ignore them. And this is relevant to what I will speak today. So I put it my title as Transforming Learning in the Disruptive Era. So we are changing society, so we need new kind of learning. And I will discuss the study from Japanese researchers, what we need, and how can we support learners. And I will describe a lesson study approach, which is actually very familiar for some of the people in Padang. You have a very nice lesson study community because your university has been supported by JICA, Japanese government, to do lesson study. And some of the schools I visited last November are still continuing lesson study. So have you heard of VUCA? We are facing the society where everything is very complex. For example, before this COVID-19 situation, it was not so hard to decide to go to your work or school. It's simple, you just go every day. But now after COVID-19, you have many decisions to make. Who's going to take care of our children at home? Or is it safe to go to workplace? Taking public transportation, how long do we have to stay home because we need to make some earning in order to survive? So these kind of decisions you have to make yourself. Nobody else can make. So even before, our world has been changing even before COVID-19. Just this COVID situation made it faster in some way. And as one of the example for this changing society, this is a very famous research conducted by Oxford's research group in 2013. And they say that 47% of jobs in the US and 35% of the UK will not be there anymore in 20 years because of AI, artificial intelligence. And how about Indonesia? So you see here some of administrative supporting services, financial institution, construction, transportation, storage, manufacturing. These are minuses. So there are a risk of no more jobs in manufacturing in 20 years. No more jobs in construction after 20 years. And on the other hand, there is education, hospitality, communication, scientific, and health. These jobs are okay, they are stable, they are there, they may be there after 20 years. And Indonesian situation here, the blue one is agriculture, and the black one or dark blue one is industry, and the gray one is services. So most likely these blue one and dark blue or black one are at the risk of disappearing because these are more of a simple jobs constituting on the left side of this graph. So we have this challenge. Everybody will have to work in a different occupation from we know right now. Okay. So what kind of jobs? There was some of the jobs on the right side, right? Who are still will be there after 20 years. What kind of job will survive? That one involving relationship building, the one involving creativity, and the third one is handling the unpredictability because the computer cannot predict unpredictable things. And how about educators? I assume many of you listening today are educators, many of lecturers, some teachers, even parents. And as you saw on the graph previously, yes, there will be. But how about your students? Not all of your students will be teachers, right? Many of your students may be working in a factory, in a construction, but these are jobs are disappearing. So we have to prepare your students, whatever the jobs there may be in 20 years. But the way we teach them or how students learn must change from right now or previously. And so how can we support learning in Buka? And I want to introduce this study conducted by a research group by Rikkyo University, and they conducted what are the impacts for students learning after the COVID-19. As you may know, Japanese schools, primary school and junior high school, reopened in June. So right now we have already opened the schools and students are going to schools. However, during the April and May, students stayed at home. So they conducted a survey for high school students. What impacted their learning at home in this situation? So on the left side, you see the hours of how students spend their time before COVID-19. So they stay at school for 11 hours, they sleep 7 hours, and they have a leisure time, a fun time for 5 hours. And maybe they do homework 1 hour every day at home. And this is after COVID-19. So they sleep 8 hours, a little bit more than before, and they spend 14 hours of their time for leisure, doing smartphone, video games. And I think this may be a case in Indonesia, or maybe your students are more diligent, I don't know. But then they study at home only 2 hours. So there is a significant amount of decrease in their learning time when they are studying from home. So now I have a question for you. So unfortunately, I cannot ask you directly, so please think in your head what is the answer. What are the factors which influence their learning time to increase? If they are more familiar with ICT skill, computer skill, will that influence? How about better facility? Maybe usually public school and private school have a more facility, right? Better facility. Will that affect? If you have a Zoom or online lectures rather than just giving the online assignments through WhatsApp, will that change? If you have a better support from your teacher to communicate and get social support, will that change? Okay, so you have 4 choices. You can say pick 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. Do you have an answer in your head? Yes, okay. So how about ICT? Actually, there is no significant difference statistically. just few minutes, but statistically there was no significant difference. Facility also no significant difference, very small difference. Online lecture rather than giving homework, also no significant difference. So communication, social support, yes, there was a significant difference, and I explain more. So these social factors actually impacted the students' learning. If students are enjoying their school, they are more likely to study, 77 minutes more likely to study longer. And if they have a good relationship with their friends at school, they study 57 minutes more compared to students who don't have a good relationship at school. And if they have a good communication with teachers while school is closed, they are likely to study 41 more minutes. So actually the social aspects is still very important, although you are far away from school. And I want you to kind of reflect back from March and think what are the factors that are most stressful for you. And I think many of us are very stressed, not because we don't have a technology or we don't have resources, but maybe because of the social factors. Like, for example, I have heard from students in Indonesia, they have been too much homework given by lecturers, I'm sorry to say, and they are quite stressed because they cannot finish. And parents are also stressed. I'm also, because my daughter is a first grader and she just started school in April, but she couldn't start school until June. And we have to work from home while taking care of our kids. And sometimes kids are difficult, right? You tell them to be quiet for 5 minutes, they cannot. So it's hard to have a meeting online. And teachers also, before COVID-19, many of Japanese teachers say, oh, I'm not very good with IT. We cannot really do anything. It's okay just to use the blackboard. But you don't have a choice anymore. Teachers need to adjust to new way to teach. And of course, everybody is very stressed from social distance. So in this changing society, we need more support and care from each other. And going back to the slide before, so we discussed how relationship building skill is important for students to have an occupation in the future. And they need to be creative in order to create the job actually, and then find a creative solution to the task you are given. And we also need to handle the unpredictability. So in order to create this kind of learning, we actually need a care and support, because this is also part of learning experience, both for educators and learners. So we need to change transforming learning, and school management is sometimes very top-down, but we cannot rely on Kepala Sekolah or dean or lecturer to find all the solutions. We need a participatory management to listen to everyone and find solution together. And for lesson aim, many of lecturers still or teacher may still feel that their job is to transfer knowledge to the students, but actually it's more than that. We need to train them and make learning opportunity for where they can find problem and they can solve by themselves. So the focus used to be output oriented, represented by exams, but now it needs to be process oriented, and we need to provide good learning experience for students. And teacher's job is not curriculum implementer and evaluator anymore, but they need to design good lesson. They need to be a good facilitator, and they need to analyze students' learning so they know how to improve the learning opportunity for students. And lesson study in sometime in Indonesia is a evaluation of a model teacher, but actually it's not that way. It needs to be opportunity to exchange practice among teachers and to reflect their own practice so they can provide better opportunity for their students. And I have been saying lesson study many times, but I realize that some of you may not be familiar with lesson study, so I explain a little bit. So lesson study is a collaborative learning of teachers where they support one another to plan, teach, observe, and improve for the purpose of improving students' learning. So lecturers or teachers get together and they decide who is going to do like an experimental lesson. But it cannot be just one time lesson, demonstration lesson, not like that, just daily lesson. And they share, the model teachers share what are the issues in their classroom, and other teachers try to help them and also try to learn from this lesson. And after they observe the lesson, they have a discussion. How can that lesson be better? And how can we provide a better opportunity for students? And also they reflect their own lesson and try to learn from this lesson and implement it in their lesson as well. So this is just a learning system for educators. And the purpose of lesson study is building a classroom community where students can learn from each other, and also peer support for teachers. And we also design inquiry-based learning, not teacher lecturing and student listen. Then there is not really a much of point of doing lesson study because we cannot really see students learning. And we have to focus on learning as a holistic learning experience, including how they feel, how they think, what are their interests for students, not just the cognitive aspects. And I want to introduce a case of lesson study from Konigami village in Okinawa. I don't know if you know where Okinawa is, but here is Japan. Can you see my cursor? Yes, okay. So here in Tokyo, right here in the middle, and Okinawa is right here, very far south, near Taiwan actually. And this is Naha city in Okinawa. And the Kunigami village I introduced is on the north. So it's a very remote area. And one of the poor area and very low standard academically in Japan used to be. And village of Kunigami does lesson study as a learning community approach, as a whole village approach. So all the kindergarten, nursery, elementary, junior high school, they do lesson study as a learning community approach. But actually this village is, you can see in this graph, the number of students is decreasing every day. I don't know if you're familiar with the social issues in Japan, but many of the remote villages in Japan is at the risk of disappearing because most of the population moves to the city and they never come back because there is very little employment in the rural areas. So in Kunigami village, there is only one kindergarten left, 5 elementary school, and only 1 junior high school, and there is no high school. So this village is at the risk of disappearing. So they have to do something where they can support each other. So they decided to do lesson study in a whole school's kindergarten in this village. And I'm going to show you some of the photos, and I'm sorry this is not very clear, but I got the permission to present to you, but not on the YouTube. And you told me it will be on the YouTube. So for the security reason of the students, I feel very uncomfortable if I put their faces, but I think you can still see their activities. And I got this PowerPoint from Pungawas in Kunigami village. His name is Naoshi Miyagi. And he's like a super pungawas to me. He knows lesson study as learning community and make very creative lesson for students. And so he presented a 5th grade mathematics students mathematics lesson, and all the students are very eager to look at the teacher in the beginning because they are anticipating for interesting lesson. And often you have these kids' faces, but after you look at them, even 10 minutes later, some of kids not so interested, not listening like this. So our job is to make them focus like this throughout the lesson, if possible. So this is the problem they were engaging in. So students are supposed to explain how to calculate the number of tiles. And they have many different ways of expressing, using picture, using equation, using words. So the problem is not just one solution, right? There are multiple solutions. So students can engage in one another. When you introduce lesson study, sometime in Indonesia, people still give the LKS worksheet, and there is only one solution. Then there is not really a point of students discussing with each other. So designing a good problem for where students can have a dialogue is very important. And also creating a learning space for students. And another misunderstanding sometimes is you have to always make them active in group working, but you don't have to, because students need a quiet time to engage their own learning. And then when there is a need to discuss, they will discuss. And how you see that this kid, girl, who is leaning toward him to explain to him, children share their own way of solving the problem, and they are quite engaged if you give them opportunity to. Most important thing is you create listening relationship rather than speaking relationship. We often focus only on speaking part, but most important thing is you train them to listen. So, for example, if this girl is explaining to this boy and he doesn't understand, he has to ask to the girl, I don't understand, please explain in another way. And she has to respond to him and try another way of explaining. This is very important. So both listener and speaker are eager to learn, and both children benefit, not just the ones who's speaking or who are learning, both benefit of teaching experience, listening experience. And so there are multiple ways of solving this. Child is quite unique, and he added additional tiles on the top to explain. So when you are observing lesson in lesson study, you have to pay attention where no child is left alone. Because we live in a society where we have to care and learn from each other. For example, in organizing this PICEEBA, I was quite impressed by the organizing committee supporting each other, right? You help each other. But somehow in the classroom, we often see child left alone. He has no support from teacher or from his friends. We cannot do that because in a society, we have to help each other. And everybody participating in collaboration. How are the relationship among children? You know, if this child doesn't like this child, it's very difficult to make them work together. So you have to build a good classroom community where children feel safe to open up their problem and listen to each other. And as I said, focus on listening relationship, not rather than speaking. Any domination of learning, if there is one student who are dominating, just do this, do this, do this, that's a problem, not only for this child, but also the children surround him or her. So how can we make this situation better? And you have to, as a teacher, you have to pay attention to child's facial expression and body languages if they have any problem, because children often are afraid to say their problem to the teacher. So teacher has to be attentive to understand what's going on with this child. And actually, students love to engage in challenging tasks. If you are teaching 4th grade, and if you tell them, okay, this is actually a problem for junior high school students, but do you want to try? They will be excited, actually. But they need to get support in order to do that. If they are doing by them himself, herself, they will have a problem, and they will be disappointed by the result, maybe. But in challenging tasks, so you need to work with one another. And problem-solving ability is not a test result, but it is taking initiative to work with others for problem-solving. This is more important. And so in order to make enjoyable learning for students, of course, educators first have to enjoy their learning opportunity. They don't want to be evaluated. They just want to get support with one another and learn from one another. So honest communication is very important. Sharing problems is important. Having a dialogue is important. Sometimes in the training, you feel like you're just being evaluated rather than learning from each other. That is a problem. So we need to find a way how to change this kind of relationship building first. And creating enjoyable learning environment is most important in order for us to continuing learn in the future. Okay, so going back, we need to create a caring and supportive community. And I showed one example, lesson study, but it doesn't have to be lesson study. You just have to find your own way of doing this. And as I said, we need to change from traditional way in the changing society. We have to be a good lesson designer rather than curriculum implementer. Learners explore and find their own way of learning rather than given by a teacher. And as an educator, you need to be a facilitator in providing care for students rather than instructor and evaluator. And we need to build a community based on trust and empathy rather than top-down management and telling each other what to do. So this is the end of my presentation, and I hope to create support students learning in Buka society. Care, dialogue, and collaboration is the key. And if you want to know more about lesson study, you have a very good lesson study community in Padang, Marwan and other people will be happy to support you, I'm sure. And let's build a learning community through lesson study or other than lesson study is good. And thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Professor Kanako Kusanagi, for the enlightening presentation. Now we move to the next invited speaker. Our last speaker in this session is Professor Efrizal Sofyan. I would like to introduce Professor Efrizal Sofyan. Professor Efrizal Sofyan got his doctor in accounting from University of Pajajaran, Indonesia. He has so many professional positions. For example, Vice of Dean, Faculty of Economics, Universitas Negeri Padang, 2015 till 2019. He is also an Agam Regency Economic Expert Team in 2002 and etc. He is got honors and award as a Chartered Accountant Indonesia 2000 from 2013, and his research interests generally in accounting. Now, let's be here Professor Efrizal Sofyan presentation. Professor Efrizal Sofian, time is yours.
Thank you, the moderator. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, hopefully invited speakers and all seminar participants are in good health. The Honorable, our Rector of Universitas Negeri Padang, our Dean of Faculty of Economics, Universitas Negeri Padang, and all committee member of 5th PICEEBA. The current hot topic is COVID-19, but the official of PICEEBA, 5th PICEEBA, consider me not expert in the field of COVID-19. So the topic given is the future of the accounting profession and education. Most of the students of accounting department have begun to worry about the future of their career. If one decade in the future, there's indeed a fundamental change in the accounting and auditing process, surely they will lose their opportunity to get a job. Many experts estimate that the accountant's job will be replaced at about 93%. For example, public accountant, corporate accountant, and tax accountant. The accountant's job will be largely replaced by artificial intelligence. The accounting study program at the Faculty of Economics is the most interested study program. For example, at UNP, of the 99 study program in UMP, I mean. Interested to studying in an accounting study program is the third largest. The number of prospective students continues that study to the university, especially for the prospective of accounting department student, is too high. While the growth in the number of companies continues decline. Most of the companies that are still operating use the transaction and accounting system that already based on IT, as well as for the process and auditing of financial statement. I'll try to discuss the possible condition in the future and about the accounting profession and what preparation that the accounting department should be prepared on graduates to face the IT era in the future. Based on the description above, the topic of my presentation is the role of accounting profession and accounting education guidance in the disruptive era. Ladies and gentlemen, the era of disruption, or is known as the fourth industrial revolution, has marked some alteration. Some change include digitization and integration of vertical and horizontal value chains, digitalization of product and service offering, and digitalization of business models and customer access. This is all three issues have had some direct impact which significantly improve accountant performance. What will the accounting profession in the future be? Accountant role be changing to some extent, which are, first, the accounting data will be cloud-based. Second, the utility of big data will be normalized. I mean, not only used for accounting data, but also data of other business support business and non-business decision based on accounting information. And third, the accounting work process will be more efficient and in the real time. Cloud accounting is a combination of computer technology system in a network and internet-based development. It functions to run internet-based accounting application at the same time. Accounting data that already exists in the software accounting stored in the cloud can be easily monitored in real time. Here, some benefit of using cloud application. This is only, for example, it can automatically synchronize cash in bank of somebody with their bank account. So the company does not need to import the data of transaction or verify the deposit and withdrawal of money manually. For example, annually bank reconciliation at the end of the month. It can give access to client. It can give access to employees, and it can give access to public accountant of document and financial data and the process of accounting firms, which they can access remotely and in real time. This application will ease the process and time based on the most updated document. Big data is an asset in the form of high volume and high speed information and variety of data that demand innovative from information processing then able to increase insight, make the decision, and do automation processes. The quick growth of data and easy accessibility are huge advantage for its user. However, this data will be out of function and cannot be used. It is not translated. The challenge faced by auditor as one of the user of big data include how big data is stored, how big data managed, and how the big data utilized. The answer is by conducting the big data analytic, which a strategy to analyze big data to uncover pattern and connection that might not be feasible so that they can gain valuable insight and information. This insight will help in making audit decisions. Ladies and gentlemen, auditors are no longer limited to sample for base testing. Through big data, the auditor can analyze all population by using population-based audit. This is very useful. It can change the implementation of an audit and affect the number of auditors, the time of completing the audit, and the cost of the audit or audit fee. Comprehensive testing of the audit objective will provide more relevant audit result because it can eliminate bias and risk in sample selection. Besides large data volumes, allow auditor to classify data based on different variables. For example, such as several transactions, such a time, and such a location, to find patterns and anomalies which then form the basis for deeper testing. Currently, there have been many clients who use big data in their business operation. auditor without adequate analytical knowledge and skill will have difficulty to understand the client business and guarantee the result of the audit. This is because the application of big data in the client operational function affect the way the audit work. The accounting information that need to be tested is not merely a transaction, but also a variety of related documents in any format. For example, audio, image, and video. For example, sales calls made to customer can be combined with revenue totals to provide a complete record of sales activity. Likewise, the surveillance video can be combined with inventory data, which requires the auditor to use it effectively as complementary audit evidence. The work of accountant profession related either to accounting education in the university. At the moment of content of accounting curriculum in Indonesia still focuses on subject and sub-subject for each core course of accounting. Also, the learning and teaching process is conducted conventionally. The core subject, such the Indonesian to elementary accounting courses in first semester, to the advanced financial accounting courses in the sixth semester, still employs teaching material of the auditing processes manually. However, some big companies, such as public company and other large companies in Indonesia, have used accounting software or artificial intelligence. The softwares include journaling transaction to produce financial statement. Even though accounting study program students have also been introduced to accounting software in form of physical documents. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the biggest issue in accounting education is graduates in accounting studies program still need to adapt their work field because most of the accounting process in many companies already use accounting software. Archiving transaction document and financial data are still done manually. Hence, accountants cannot access document and data in real time. What are the challenges of graduates of the accounting study program in disruptive era? Are our graduates able to develop their competence in the world of work that is relevant to their field competence? In disruptive era, depend to my opinion, technological development can change business patterns in which the assets managed by companies are mostly in the form of technology. One day, the technology will decrease the use of human resources, including accounting staff. Company assets in the form of building and office equipment can be minimized because operations do not require a lot of places. After all, it is based on a virtual office or shop and how to sell products and services through the online market. To anticipate this challenge, the accounting curriculum and material in the accounting study program need to be reviewed so that accounting students can compete well to cope up with the change in the future. An accountant should improve their knowledge and be familiar with information of technology and understand the big data that store a lot of information. 3 things can be done by university improving the quality of education to bring superior human resource. First is to revise the curriculum reorientation. Curriculum reorientation must be able to produce graduates who have that literacy, technology literacy, and human literacy abilities. There need to be engagements with internal and external parties or stakeholders, such as graduate user and the Professional Accountant Association. In Indonesia means Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia. The second thing is learning system innovation. The second thing is learning system innovation. In the learning system, lecturer and student must explore the potential of knowledge to be able to compute the area of the Industrial Revolution 4.0. In the era of the Industrial Revolution 4.0, accountants must strengthen their expertise, open up insight, inspire strong values and ethics so that they can survive the pressure and win the competition. The learning system must be structured into active student. I mean, centered learning that is online or online based. With the independent learning program in Indonesia, it is an opportunity for students in Indonesia, in accounting student studies, to take courses related technology, which are the accompanying expertise in the field of accounting. Overall, student needs improvement in soft skill so that the human resource remain competitive and have skills such as leadership, entrepreneurship, and social entrepreneurship. The ability to work in term, ability to work in variety of environment, variety cultures are different, both when in abroad. High order mental skills and high order thinking skills. Depend to the merit and increase, there are 4 main steps for professional accountant in dealing with Industry 4.0, namely as follows. First, awareness. Be aware of the development of the Industrial Revolution 4.0 by looking at opportunities that will emerge, realizing the potential of new business development. For example, in Germany, 80% of companies have plans to face the Industrial Revolution 4.0. And in China, 60% of companies have building knowledge. Most countries are in the early stage of information dissemination. Second, education. Put pressure on education institutions to make curriculum relevant for accounting students to adapt the digital connectivity. Conduct trainings such as information management on shared platforms. They need for real-time accounting for stakeholders. Third, Professional development. Improve the performance of professional organization and their professional development program. Fourth, reaching out. Accountants have less control over data. Transdisciplinary mix of advisors. Example, environmental accounting is very dependent on physical information obtained under the responsibility of technician. Connectivity between technician and accountant must be established so that accounting information can be maintained properly. That is the end of my presentation. I really hope you can take some advantage. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Professor Rizal Sofyan, for the enlightening presentation. Now we will enter the next session. We will go to question and answer session. We got so many questions from all our participants, but because the limitation of time, maybe we can only solve just some of questions. Right. The first question comes from Doni Satria, Universitas Negeri Padang, to Professor Malik. The result indicated the return on capital both in poor and rich countries in increasing, and the gap between poor and rich is wider. Based on your result, the sharp increase was started from early 2000, especially for the poor countries. The gap sharply increases after the global financial crisis in 2008. Is there any explanation to these two findings? The second question came from Zaskia, University of Indonesia, to Professor Kanako Kusanagi. Related to the artificial intelligence role to the replace some job for the next 20 years. There's a job in financial industry such as credit analysis, which needs the analytical skill and good feeling on deciding the customer's credit worthiness. So do you think this kind of replaced by artificial intelligence? And the third question is from Sri Siswati to Professor Efrizal Sofyan. We have three indicators in Human Development Index: education, health, and economy. We need big data about three indicators. How far accounting education has needed to solve the economy and health during this pandemic? Okay, the first question will be answered by Professor Deborah Malik. Professor, time is yours.
Okay, thank you. The question that sharp increase started actually not from 2000. The gap started increasing from 1990. In fact, so that is the break there, if you remember the slide correctly. So gap widened over time. So there is nothing to do, in fact, with 2008 or global financial crisis. Even if you restrict the data set till 2008, still you have the same explanation here. So let me tell you, the it should be investigated is to do some kind of variance decomposition. Like you have to look at each of the components of the return on capital, and that includes capital output ratio, that includes the share of shadow economy, that inputs the ratio of the private to public capital, and the most importantly, the relative price of output or relative price of capital. That means the ratio of output price to the ratio of the investment price. So we have done some kind of variance decomposition. So it is the relative price, in fact, that has been increasing over time. That means PY, price of output divided by price of investment good, that has been increasing over time. So in investment literature, that is also called user cost of capital, that consists of several terms. In fact, that also includes some markup, some other things. So in fact, we are still working on that, and we need more data cross-country level to investigate more. And as I mentioned during my presentation, that is a second project that we are going to look at. So once again, this puzzle still remains, and it is nothing to do with the global financial crisis. Even if you stop your data before global financial crisis, you end up with the same conclusion here.
Thank you very much. Now the second question will be answered by Professor Kanako Kusanagi. Professor, time is yours.
Thank you very much for for your question. Actually, I feel like Dr. Afrida is more suitable for answering this question than me, because you know about the industry. So maybe he can add me later. But from my understanding, financial jobs in financial industry is actually at the risk of disappearing, and so you have many challenges ahead. But I understand that it's just mean that for example, rather than having 10 analysts, maybe you will only have one analyst who are managers to be in controls of handling and these automatic analysis. So as a manager, you have to deal with uncertainties and unpredictability. So it can still be a job, but you have to find a new way of working with new data and the new way of analysis. So Dr. Frida, will you like to add something to it? Because I'm so happy to hear your presentation, because you discuss almost the similar things from the accountant point of view, and that was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Kanako Kusanagi. And the third question will be answered by Professor Efrizal Sofyan, and maybe our professor will be edit your Professor Kanako answer. Okay, Professor Efrizal Sofyan, time is yours.
Thank you, moderator. I will try to answer Ms. Risiswati about the what is the accounting education to the health and to the solve the economic. Depend to my opinion, the profession of accounting is to produce the financial statement. Financial statement will be used for the corporation, entrepreneur, to make the operating decision making. Now, the good operating decision making, depend to my opinion, will be increase the corporation value. Now, but at the pandemic, our student learning or studying from home, from house, by e-learning. Most of them inform me that most students face the handicap at about their network, and about the facilities, so that for the next time, maybe accounting educational, we can find the problem solving, how to add about the network, and then add about the skill of we are the student, we are the lecturer, how to make our students sure in study. Maybe that is my opinion, Mrs. Sri Siswati.
Right, thank you, Professor. Now we move to the next question for each invited speaker. The first question is from Hari, Andalas University, to Professor Deborah Malik. Why using the same elasticity of substitution between capital and labor for both rich and poor countries? Since this parameter play an important role in explaining capital misallocation. And the second question is from Yul Henry, Universitas Negeri Padang, to Professor Kanako Kusanagi. COVID-19 inhibits us from interacting. How will the influence of the use of online learning on social life and children's behavior in the future? How is Japan's experience in organizing learning at school at home? And the third question is from Iren Sukma Lestari from Widyatama University Bandung to Professor Efrizal Sofyan. Our data is not yet integrated. How is the digital accounting system done using GCG principles? Then how to detect a digital system that is stored data to cabinets? Right? To answer the first question, Professor Deborah Malik, time is yours.
Thank you. So that's a fantastic question, in fact, and I was expecting this kind of question. So that parameter elasticity of substitution is still so crucial and most understudied parameter. In fact, the most of the study is around US, and still the jury is out. Still, there's a huge debate on what is the precise value of that value of that parameter. Just I can give you a very simple example. I'm sure that you are familiar with Thomas Piketty's book that on capital. So he estimated and he used a parameter value of 1.5. On the other hand, in the literature, even my paper in the American Economic Journal, we found it is around 0.4. So even for US, it ranges between 0.4 to 1.5. And the reason is that the elasticity of substitution is a second order parameter of the CES production function, which is almost difficult to estimate. Having said that, so now why do I use the same parameter? In fact, I have a paper published in Labor Economics in 2012. And in fact, that came out of my PhD thesis. And probably that is the only paper that estimates elasticity of substitution at the cross-country level. So I estimated it for 90 countries. And then the second stage, I looked at the effect of that elasticity of substitution on economic growth. So here in this paper, to get the value of poor and rich countries, I took the average from that previous paper, my PhD thesis, where I took the average of poor and rich countries, and it slightly differ. In fact, they're very close. Still, we need more study on that. And the second thing is that if you look at my second graph, when I was looking at the benefit or output gain from reallocation of capital, we showed the result for 3 parameter values. So the best way is to look at to calculate those numbers for different parameter values. So sigma equals 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, and then you compare across row. So you compare one row for the poor country with another row for the rich country, then you can get a sense of that thing. But still, okay, my concluding remark would be that this choice of number is based on that cross-country level estimate in 2012 labor economics paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Deborah Malik. Now, to answer the next question is Professor Kanako Kusanagi. Time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Henry, for your question. So you asked about online classroom learning and social aspects of learning. Actually, Japanese education at the primary level is facing lots of challenges because we are not used to using online education. And as I told you, actually, we have already opened the school in June. So most of the schools did not do online learning for primary school. Most of the public schools could not accommodate with this change so quickly. So we just were given homework assignments to do at home. And now the school has opened, but of course children has to keep social distancing from each other, which is almost impossible. And although we emphasize social aspects of learning, so for example, we have a many activity, non-academic activity outside of subject learning where students interact with one another. For example, my daughter is first grade and sixth grade students come to the first grade and they teach the students how to clean the classroom together. But of course, due to the social distancing, it has become quite difficult. So we have many challenges in the primary school level. And there was one question, additional question. I saw that hikikomori in Japan is increasing due to the COVID-19. And in relation to this, as a hikikomori is people who cannot go outside of their house because they have a very bad experience of being bullied in the school or bad relationship at work, and they're afraid to go out from their house. And I think like in Japan, in Indonesia too, there are some students who cannot go to school because they have these kind of social problems at school and they want to go, but they cannot go. And they just stay at home and try to learn by himself or herself. And good news for this kind of students in the COVID-19 situation is some of them are able to learn from home, taking this online learning opportunity if the school provided this. And so in the normal situation, they were not able to participate in classroom learning, but online situation, some of them could participate. So that was a positive impact. And at the university level, I recently heard a presentation done by University of Tokyo students, and they did their own survey on their student community. How do you think about this online learning opportunity? And actually, many students liked it because they could interact with their classrooms, students in the breakout session in the Zoom. And they could repeatedly listen to the lecture if the recording was provided to the students. So it enables the students to shorten the commuting time and many ways to learn, like repeatedly listen to the presentation or give them time to think before submitting the assignment. So it seems like in Japan, online learning at the university level is more effective and giving more good opportunity for students. But we are struggling at the primary school level because we emphasize this kind of social interaction, which is quite difficult at this time. Thank you for your question.
All right, thank you, Professor Kanako Kusanagi. Now, Professor Efrizal Sofyan will answer the third question. Professor, time is yours.
Okay, Irene Sukma Lestari from Widyatama University, Bandung. Thank you for your question. I felt your question is too heavy for me to answer it. There is no difficult. Your question, our data is not yet integrated. How is the digital accounting system done using good corporate governance principles? Mrs. Irina, depend to my opinion, there is not the correlation, the dangerous correlation between the principle of good corporate governance to the digital accounting system. Because all of the outsider user of the data from the company is that be allowed from the leader from the company to use it. For example, accountant to verify the document of the invoice, bill of lading, and etc. Public accountant, before verify that document, receive first the admission alert from the corporate leader. That is allow with the transparency, accountability. But at about then how to detect the digital system that is stored data to cabinets? Wow. I am so sorry, Ms. Irene. I am not the expert at about the operational of the digital accounting system. We are the user only. So that maybe we can discuss for the next occasion. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Efrizal Sofyan. We still have a question from our participants. Now, let's see the third question from to all the invited speakers. The first is from Shamil, Universitas Negeri Padang, to Kanako Kusanagi. How could we or educator teach the long-distance classroom activities effectively and efficiently in COVID-19 pandemic situation, while our students not in the classroom or they are learning at the hometown? And how teacher to control the students spending time to do the school activities or schoolwork activities at home? Is it possible for us to do lesson study in COVID-19 pandemic time situation, like in Universitas Negeri Padang, the class activity for this semester will do studying for home only? The second question is from Jonal Simarmata, Universitas Negeri Padang, to Professor Deborah Malik. Why is it called Lucas paradox? The next question is from Tri Kurniawati, Universitas Negeri Padang to Professor Kanako Kusanagi, sorry. During the pandemic, we will have the online learning and self-learning. How could the educators build or improve the student learning skill? And all right, there is another question for Sri Siswati to Efrizal Sofyan. I thought each person will got its question, but it looks like Professor Kanako Kusanagi have 2 questions. Now from to Dr. Efrizal Sofyan, you have Professor Efrizal Sofyan, you have 1 question. Can you tell about implementation ethic and value in ER4? All right. The first question will be answered by Professor Kanako Kusanagi. Professor, time is yours.
So Ibu Dina, so I have 2 questions, and one question is it possible to do online lesson study? Is that right? And the other one is, I think they are very similar, right? Can you explain to me again? Online learning. Okay, building student learning skills. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, actually, building social aspects of learning is quite difficult in this online learning, but I want to suggest 2 things. First one is rather than focusing on the learning time, you should focus on the quality of learning. As a teacher, we often focused on how many classes the students have participated, but actually it should be the quality of learning that should be the target. And we need to improve the quality of learning experience for students. And I don't know which level this questionnaire is teaching in primary school or university, but whatever the level you are teaching, I think you can include like some of social activities through online. For example, you can introduce a discussion among students. What is your experience of COVID-19? You can share the problems at home, or not being able to see your friends, not being having space to yourself to learn because there are family members, or this kind of common issues can build our students motivated to engage. And often in classroom, you have a one way of teacher lecturing students about the material. So first we need to change this way of interaction. And in order to do that, most of the time, non-academic issue is very effective. If you want students to discuss about accounting, it may be a bit difficult, but start with something like social issues around you. It could change this way of communicating with one another. That's my answer to the first question. And then second one, online lesson study. Yes, I think it is very possible, and it's related to my answer to the first one. I think educators also face many challenges in this online learning and COVID-19 situation. So in order to do lesson study, you have to find a common philosophy or vision why you want to do lesson study. And often this philosophy is providing a quality learning for students. And in order to do that, what are your issues? Is it the way of you communicate with your students, or is it the way of designing lesson, or is it the way of using technology into the lesson? And you set your common agenda by discussing, not just the dean deciding which which lesson study you want to focus on, but it has to be a dialogue. So you decide what kind of lesson study you want to have, and then you discuss your problems first. And then in order to solve this common problem, what can you do? And then I think it will be very useful lesson study for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kanako Kusanagi. Now, the next question will be answered by Professor Deborah Malik. Professor, time is yours.
So why is it called Lucas paradox? Because this paradox was raised by Lucas, so it is after his name. So in his 1990 paper in American Economic Review, it's a very short paper, but it's one of the most influential papers in economics. He first estimated the marginal product of capital for two sets of countries, rich and poor countries, and he found that marginal product of capital is very high in poor countries compared to the rich countries. And then he was trying to find different explanations for that human capital, so many things, but still after accounting for many factors, still the marginal product of capital remained very high in poor countries compared to rich countries. Now the second part is that if that is true, and it is in fact true, then the paradox is that then why is capital not flowing to poor countries from rich countries? There are many explanations, but as I mentioned in my presentation, that the Casselian Fair and some they challenged the Lucas paradox. So until their paper, the idea was that Lucas paradox exists and how to explain that. And in 2007, they told that no, Lucas paradox does not exist at all. Now in our paper, when we re-estimate, we say that no, yes, the paradox still exists, and we have to explain. And then we have some other puzzles there. It is not only that paradox exists, and that paradox is that means the gap is widening, in fact, since 1990. So we have another puzzle that still we couldn't answer. And in fact, in my previous answer to another participant, I said that okay, we are working on that, and we have very close to an answer, and that is our second work, ongoing work. Thank you.
Now, we are moving to the next question. Okay. Now we are moving to the next question. The answer will be the question will be answered by Professor Efrizal Sofian. Professor, time is yours.
Thank you, our moderator. I receive heavy questions because the question about ethic, that is for the next era, not ethic implementation right now. But what is the ethic for accountant for the next era? First, increase the competency. The competency not about the accounting standard, not about the auditing standard, but the competency, combine your competence in the technology, information of technology. And then open the insight and about the combination from accounting, auditing, and technology. Don't avoid the technology, because the technology will help us to solve our duties not for a long time. So that the technology is not a problem, but the technology is the support to support the system for accountability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Efrizal Sofyan. We still have so many questions. Okay, we have 4 questions. 3 of them are for Professor Kanako Kusanagi. The first one is from Dinda. Estekip University. How is the learning process carried out in Japan so that it can foster high creativity in students? The second question is from Diana, Riau University, also to Kanako Kusanagi, Professor Kanako Kusanagi. How many students in a classroom to ensure optimal learning process? The third question for Kanako Professor Kanako Kusanagi is from Armiati, Universitas Negeri Padang. On the situation of learning from home, how we design effective learning practices from students in Japan. And we also have I think it's quite a question from Johan to Professor Efrizal Sofyan. Does the cloud technology make the audit difficult? What challenge for auditor? Which one is easier between doing audit with IT-based or conventional based? What is the challenge for the university to prepare the accounting graduate to meet the company's need industrial revolution 4.0? All right, and I think I will give the first I think for answer the first question, I will give it to Professor Kanako Kusanagi. Professor Kanako Kusanagi, time is yours.
Thank you very much for your question. How to foster creativity? That's always a very difficult question to answer. I think what we need to do is, when we think about creativity and innovation, you think about something very creative, or like inventing a new equipment or a computer. But I think the creativity starts from something very small. And as an educator, we need to acknowledge small changes. And I think the key is problem finding. Because in order to solve a problem, you have to find a problem first, which is often lacking in our classrooms. For example, Japanese students do school cleaning, right? And so students clean their own classrooms during the break time, and in order to maintain a good learning environment for each other, for the community. And often we have students or some classrooms that are not very clean. Some trash on the floor, something like that. And in this kind of situation, we ask students to have a discussion among themselves. Can you look around your classroom and see any trash? And then students look down. Oh yeah, we found some trash or eraser on the floor, some pencil on the floor. And then we ask the students, so how can we maintain clean learning environment? Or why is it important to maintain a clean environment? And then students have their own answers. Oh, because we have to, if it's not clean, we cannot focus well, or if there's a eraser drop on the floor, somebody have a problem erasing thing. So this kind of small creativity students already have, but we don't give them opportunity to use. So I think we can start from something like this, something small but something really related to their school life or home life. Okay, that's the answer to the first question. And Linda has the second question: how many students is optimal number of students in the classroom? This depending on the context. If you're just doing one-way lecture, that's not a problem if you have a 30 students, 40 students. But if you want to have a more interactive message, I think having 40 students is a bit too much. And in fact, right now in this COVID-19 situation in Japan, we have a petition among academics to make half classroom size to a half. I think in Japan, it's very similar to Indonesia, maybe between 30 to 40 students in classroom. And we want to make it like 20 students in a classroom, because in order to provide good care and also social distancing and more interactive message is too big. That's our ideas, but it also varies on the resources and the situation. And for the second one, Armiati asked about how to design learning from home. And I think the key is you have to prepare students to learn independently. And when I said university students have a more positive experience in learning compared to elementary school students learning at home, it is because university students have a better ability to learn by himself or herself, right? So even if they are giving assignment, they know how to look up on the internet and solve a problem and then submit. But maybe primary school students, they don't have ability to learn by himself or herself. So I think that beside from teaching the subject the teacher has to teach, they also need to teach the students learning skill, and they need to be given feedback. And of course, if teacher can provide feedback to individual students, that's most helpful. But if you have a 40 students and then you cannot help 40 students to grade paper every day, which is also a big burden on Japanese teacher. They do that sometime every day. Like they make the students write the diary and they give feedback to each student every day. So it takes lots of time. So if you cannot do that, you can at least give the students like a pair work or group work so they can give feedback to each other. Then you will have a less burden on yourself. But I think the combination of these two is even better. So students are used to not just receiving the evaluation, but they can give feedbacks to each other. So they learn how to do this. So maybe designing a lesson doesn't have to be drastically different from what you are doing right now, but you have to find a way to give feedback to students. Otherwise, they will have a lower and lower motivation at home. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kanako Kusanagi. Now, I would like to give time to Professor Efrizal Sofyan to answer the question. Professor, time is yours.
Okay, thank you, our moderator, and thank you, Mr. Johan. Your question, does the cloud technology make the audit difficult? Oh, of course not. Maybe the cloud system will be make the easily auditing process for accountant. For instance, for example, at the traditional audit, public accountant from Jakarta come to Padang, for example, live to Padang. But with the cloud technology, the auditor only stay at Jakarta. By the information system, the auditor can find out all of the document, all of the data that accountant field needs to formulation their opinion. For the other example, calculation, recalculation. The public accountant, there is no time to ask the officer of the client about the data, about depreciation, for example, but the public accountant from his office, for example, in Jakarta, public accountant can count it, recalculate it. What it depends on the accountant must need to recalculate it. This is not a time must be go to the location of the corporation. And then at about sample, if the traditional method, accountant must go to the corporation and then ask the officer at the corporation and then choose the document that will be sample. But the cloud system, maybe accountant for the total sampling is okay. The answer of your question, that cloud technology make the audit difficult, depends, to my opinion, no. What challenge for auditor? First, increase the ability in using technology. Accountant not accompanied her competence, his competency with technology, depend, to my opinion, he can't operation the cloud system. Maybe he must go to the corporate to find out the document that they need. So that the second, the accountant must increase their insight. Don't feel the technology is too heavy. Don't feel the technology is the phenomenon, a problem. But technology feel a friend for solving our job. And then at the third, accountant must be strengthened the ethic, implementation the ethic. That is what is the challenge for auditor? Technology, increase the competency about technology, and then increase the implementation of the ethic. And then don't forget to reduce the audit fee, because the accountant not use much time to evaluate the document of the financial statement. And then, what is the challenge for the university to prepare the accounting graduate to meet the company's need in Industrial Revolution 4.0? Above, I have make the description that first, revise the curriculum reorientation. What type of curriculum will we revise? we must add our curriculum, we must addition our curriculum with the technology. The combination, the manual about accounting with the technology information. This is not only for our student, but this is too important for our lecturer to increase our competency about technology. The second, the learning system. Yeah, we must increase learning system based on students. We must edit, we must, the computer, PC, the computer, personal computer for our students. And then the third, the learning system must be structured into active-centered learning. Yeah, sorry, I have explained just now. I think that the challenge for university, not only for students, but only for our lecturer and the facilities. Three types: students, lecturer, facilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Efrizal Sofyan. We still have several questions, but I think this is the last question for each speakers. The first question is from Yolit, Universitas Negeri Padang, to Professor Deborah Malik. The capital inflows from rich countries tend to decrease, and the capital inflows tend to increase after the global financial crisis. While the return of capital increases, this is the consequences of the increasing ROK gap. In your ROK computing, is it possible to add risk premium factor, or it is already included in the computed ROK? The second question is from Aisyah, Faculty of Economics, University of Muhammadiyah Palembang, to Professor Efrizal Sofyan. The main obstacle in managing big data is human resources. According to you, what kind of human resource competency can explore this field? And the last question is from Faisal Arif from Universitas Negeri Padang to Professor Kanako Kusanagi. Does COVID-19 increase the number of hikikomori in Japan due to the socialization among students because the age of student is very susceptible to hikikomori? All right, to answer the first question, Professor Deborah Malik, time is yours.
Can you please share the screen, because it's a very nice question. I need to read the question every second, every moment. So can you please keep that question on the screen?
Yes.
Please do that. Okay, so taking global financial crisis as a cutoff, yes, it's may or may not be fully correct. So let me tell you, very recently I was watching a similar seminar by Donny Redrick. He was giving the seminar at Princeton University. He's at Harvard. No, please keep the screen. I need that because okay, please keep that. I need it, in fact. So what he was saying is that deglobalization started before 2008, in fact. slowly, deglobalization, and then it started again after 2008, and after COVID, deglobalization must be quick and at all. So even as I mentioned before, that even if I take or cut our data point till 2008, in fact, the increasing gap remains. So that is not the answer, but your second point, which is very important, the risk premium factor kind of thing. Okay, now, okay, let me tell you the expression to calculate return on capital that consists of different components: output capital ratio, and then the relative price. That is the most important factor. So when we did some variance decomposition, and as I mentioned to my answer to another question, that we found that that is the factor that is causing. So this is user cost of capital. Yes, now that is a composite term that includes many things, in fact, risk premium and many other things. It also include the markup. In fact, if you look at, if the markup is increasing, which is the price over marginal cost markup and all these things. So these are the couple of factors. Now we need to unpack that term, the relative price term, and we need to look at each and every component. So by this time, let me tell you another thing, what is happening here. There is a consensus among almost all economists that the relative or the price of capital good is decreasing over time because of the technological improvement. If you look at even your computer, effectively computer price is decreasing over time. All the electronics price, software price is decreasing over time. Even if you pay the same price, you get a better quality. So it essentially means that price is decreasing. Having said that, when we look at the total capital composition all over the world, 80% of total capital stock is establishment, housing, building and construction sector, and only 20% is other capital. Now, when we say that price of capital is decreasing, in fact, it means that price of machineries, price of software, price of computer, these are decreasing. But when you calculate an aggregate price index for investment goods or the capital good, in fact, that price is not increasing. So that price has also gone up. So we have to unpack that term. And of course, risk premium may be a potential factor, but without unbundling that term, at this stage, I don't want to speculate the relative importance of each of the terms. Even the depreciation rate can be another factor. So let me tell you how does the depreciation, when we calculate the capital stock, as you might know, we use some kind of, it's called perpetual inventory method. We need to assume some kind of depreciation rate. Now, what is the depreciation rate of the building that at this moment you are sitting? And what is the depreciation rate of the laptop that you are using? Probably depreciation rate of the building that you are now sitting in is less than 2% a year. But the depreciation rate of your laptop is more than 20% a year. So over time, the capital composition is also changing. Investment pattern is changing. At the same time, each component of investment has also a different depreciation rate. So when we unpack that term, that relative price of investment relative to price of output, we need to unpack each term there. In fact, depreciation rate is another term, how it is evolving over time because of changing the composition of capital over time. So, and thank you very much for this nice question.
Thank you, Professor Deborah Malik. Now, the second question will be answered by Professor Efrizal Sofian. So, Professor Efrizal Sofian, time is yours.
Okay, Budina. The last question from Aisha. Aisha, that is the same name with my second granddaughter. Aisha asked me about the operational, the big data. What types of the operational of big data, the characteristic of, for a moment. Yeah. What kind of human resource competencies can explore this field? Miss Aisha, to operational the big data, I think the operator of big data must know about the how is the manager need about data, how is the auditor need, and how the stockholder need. So the data that he combined, that is not garbage. That data must useful for everyone who need the data. For example, public accountant. For example, about selling transaction, sales transaction. He can classify about transaction by months, and then by type of product, and then by credit of case, and then etc. So the operator of big data, he know about technology. Is the best big data operator if he know about the accounting. So the operator of big data, accountant. He know about the financial accounting, cost accounting, and auditing. And so he's to know about the auditing standard or accounting standard. So it can preparation the data that the professional need. I think that is my answer about your question, Ms. Aisha. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Eprizal Sofyan. Now, the third question will be answered by Professor Kanako Kusanagi. Professor, time is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ivina. And thank you, Faisal, for your question about hikikomori. And as I explained a little bit earlier, hikikomori is a person who have a problem with integrating with society and isolate himself or herself inside the house and cannot go out. Usually live with the parents. So parents take care of them, but they cannot go out from their room often or their house. And I think actually the COVID-19 situation is actually very ideal for hikikomori because those of us who are not hikikomori are forced to live like hikikomori, right? We cannot go out from our house and we cannot go anywhere, meet friends. And hikikomori are also happier because we don't force them to go out. We don't say, hey, let's come out and go to school or go to work. You have to be productive. We don't say that because we cannot. So actually, it's quite interestingly, they are happier in COVID-19 situation, at least in Indonesia. In Japan, we are almost back to normal, so maybe not so much anymore. But in relation to the social aspects Faisal was wondering about, I want to share this case from Maran. I think you can see my screen right now, right? I want to share this online learning experience from my friend. So Ibu Ima is a 6th grade teacher, and she works very closely with my friend Ryo Suzuki, who is supporting her, building her classroom. in this school in Malang. And do you see that children are doing online activity here? And this is their newsletter. And can you read here? Mas Ladzi said, amazing and so much fun for me to discuss with my friends. But what I do not like is the fact that we have less than 1 hour for our math lessons. I wish we could learn longer so that we could discuss our homework more together. Just an idea, maybe we can add another Zoom link in the Google Classroom because we only have 40 minutes for each session. Can you imagine 6th grade said, I want to have a more classroom learning time, right? It's amazing, I think. And the key is he has built this classroom community and he enjoys learning with their friends. And so this happened before COVID-19 situation. So in their daily classroom, students are learning from each other. So I want to share a little bit of video so you understand. So this is a math lesson, but can you see the students are enjoying, right? So if you have this kind of relationship building and social skills to interact with one another, they can learn even in the online situation. So I think our focus as educator is how to build this kind of relationship building and social skills among students. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kanako Kusanagi, and thank you very much to all speakers for wonderful explanation. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of the plenary session. I apologize for the mistakes that I've made as a moderator. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a nice conference and let me wishing you all an enriching, knowledgeable, and learning experience day. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The next section will be held by Master Ceremony. Hari, time is yours.
Okay, thank you for Assistant Professor Dina Patricia, PhD, and all the invited speakers. The next agenda, the closing speech by Dean of Economics Faculty, Universitas Negeri Padang, Associate Professor Dr. Idris MSE. Time is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thanks to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, who has been blessing and giving us mercies. And thanks to Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who has guided us to the right way. Honorable Vice Rector and Deans of Faculties in Universitas Negeri Padang, the organizing committee members of the 5th Padang International Conference on Education, Economics, Business and Accounting, PICEEBA, invite speakers, and all participants. First of all, I would like to thank to all of you for your participation in this conference. Today is an exceptional day. This conference is a part of our vision to be a reputable university. For your information, Universitas Negeri Padang has been changing from a teaching university to a research university as the best way to become an entrepreneurship university in the future. Hence, publication such as in conference or journal is compulsory to achieve our goals. In addition, I am so glad that so many special people have been able to join in this online conference. I really hope that all of us enjoy our today conference and have got some valuable experience for our future. Finally, on behalf of Rector Universitas Negeri Padang, I would like to thank to all committee members who have seriously arranged this conference. Congratulations, and we really appreciate all your effort. By saying Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, I officially close this conference. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
This is the end of the opening ceremony. We are thankful to the all guests and the participants for the attention of this ceremony. According to the agenda, parallel session will be start at 1:30 p.m. For the information of the parallel session, already shared on the WhatsApp group of the presenter and author. See you next time. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.